So when you think about crisis communications, the objective, and this is actually for all communications, the objective is to shape public discussion on any topic or situation involving your library. And that's your job, right? Because you guys are the experts. And that's something to try to remember, certainly as a crisis plays out, that, you know, you're the one who should be framing the issues for the public, and your staff, obviously, the trustees, all speaking in the same sort of, with the same content, you know, framing the issue, library as a resource, and not conceding that ground to anyone else, including a reporter or a special interest group or someone in the community who's decided they don't like the books on your shelves. Okay, so I want to sort of, you know, put that out there for you to consider. And, you know, the overarching goals when you're talking about, you know, managing communications, specifically crisis communications, is to always begin with this idea that your library is a resource for the community. It's a critical resource. And, you know, your lens should be thinking about how you're going to communicate that to your folks. And I know many of you do. And you have very robust promotional sort of outreach efforts for your programs online, community events, just in the library itself. But that's really, really important, because without demonstrating the value that your library has to the community, you know, everything that follows is really, it doesn't have the context it needs to have. You also want to make sure that you're not putting up any barriers to people getting information. So that means when you're talking about the library, that you're using plain language, that you're not what I like to call like highbrow language, or you're not using government speak or acronyms or things that make people sort of go, what are they saying? You know, what is he or she talking about? And specifically, you know, you want to remove any barriers around sort of, you know, what kind of vibe are you putting out there for the community? Is the library a place that is welcoming and, you know, for all groups and that type of thing? And I know I'm preaching to the choir that that's already happening, but that's really an important component to any kind of communications or crisis communications effort. So how do we get there? How do we, you know, reach these goals? You heard a little bit earlier, and I think you're going to hear more from Kate. James had mentioned, you know, policies are really important, you know, policies that you can lean on in a crisis so that you're not creating things out of whole cloth when a crisis is in play, is super important. Having your messages prepared in advance, specifically, what do you want to say? You know, really drill down. How do you want to communicate a certain issue? Community support, make sure you've got that. Who are the folks in your community who are willing to support you on the record? That means if a reporter would like to speak with, you know, somebody who uses the library, a patron, that maybe you've got somebody in mind who you know would be supportive and say the things that you would like them to say, that you're all in sync. And as I mentioned in the last slide, you know, constantly promoting the work that you guys are doing, because it's vast and it's a tremendously helpful tool to the community, and not being afraid to push that out even during a crisis. So there are a couple things that are true about crises and communication in general, but the first thing and the most important thing is that the first one out of the gate kind of wins, right? Sets the narrative. If you're playing catch up, if you've got a detractor saying something negative about the library or about you, now you're playing catch up. You've lost ground. So to the extent that you can frame these issues first for the public, that's critical. And you'll hear me talk about this, you know, in a little bit, but looking at media outlets as a valuable pipeline, but only a pipeline for your community, right? So you're not necessarily speaking to a reporter if you're doing an interview, just the same way you're not speaking to one person if you're doing a presentation. You're really talking to your community, and so you have to keep that in mind. Media inquiries are really important to respond to quickly. It doesn't mean that you need to tell them anything in particular. You're just acknowledging that, you know what, we got your call, would like to hear a little bit more about what you're looking for. Sometimes they'll email that to you. But it's basically, it's avoiding something appearing in print or online that says, the library wasn't available for comment. That's not positive for anyone. Humanizing the issues are huge, right? You talk about patrons a lot. I think I've used the term patron, but to the extent that you can, it's, caregivers in our community. It's our older members of the community. It's, children who enjoy our read-along programs or, et cetera. So it's trying to humanize that. That's how you get things to land. Third-party supporters, you'll hear me talk about that a fair amount. There are things that you are not going to be able to say publicly, either because of your political structure, the support or lack of support that you have there, but that other folks can say publicly. And that's where, if you can cultivate some, what I call third-party supporters, maybe it's moms, maybe it's, the heads of book clubs, maybe it's teachers, maybe it's a small business owner, get sort of those folks and have them in mind if you've got an opportunity where you need somebody to say something like, hey, you know what? I want to make a decision about the kind of book that my child gets to read, nobody else, or something like that, okay? So to the extent that you can, you want to try to get those folks together. And then you want to resist letting a crisis take over your work, moving forward. You want to respond to a crisis in the moment. You want to have everything set up to deal with it, but then you want to be able to move on and do the work that you need to do. You can't let it, sort of just hold you back from doing what you're there to do for the community. That's your job, right? So you've got to find a way to compartmentalize a crisis, at the same time taking care of it so that it's not something that just carries on for days and days and days. I think it would make sense sort of at this point to get a feel, maybe, and Erin, you can help me with that, get a feel for how many of you have had to deal with a crisis and of any sort that is around the challenges or protests or any kind of online negative comment. If you can give me just a show of hands, that would be fantastic.
You can either actually use your hand or you can use the reaction button at the bottom of your screen.
Wow. So it looks like a fair amount. Okay. That's helpful to me. So when you think about how you felt when you were dealing with that crisis and looking back saying, gosh, what would I do differently? What did I feel most vulnerable about? Those are the feelings and, those are the weaknesses that we want to deal with, right? Because there's, especially as we said earlier, in this type of a scenario, there's no reason why there aren't things that you can do now that when a crisis is in play, you're like, oh, okay, you know what? I have a draft statement ready to go to the press. Let's just tweak that and send that out. Or reporters are looking for information about, the challenges. Let me take a fact sheet that we've already written and approved and send that to them to get them started on what they need to do. Let me offer a reporter, someone to speak to from the community that can give their perspective, but that it supports what we've been saying, type of thing. So you want to think about any potential scenario that might come down the pike. So when I was working, and my apologies, I realized I didn't give you a lot of my background, but I was a press secretary in government for, 3 different governors, and worked in public safety and public health primarily. And so I dealt with a lot of crises. And one of the things that was very helpful to us was anticipating what could happen, right? Like, certain things are going to happen. I did a fair amount of work with criminal justice, and my colleagues and I would say, yep, it's Friday at 4 o'clock. Something's happening. Someone's going to try to break out of prison. There's going to be something, right, that we deal with. So what you want to do is think about what could potentially happen, okay? You want to find out what kind of support you have. I'm sure most of you already know from your local government. Is your mayor supportive of what you're doing, or your board of selectmen? Are your trustees supportive? Have they been made aware of what's going on? Is that something that you need to do? Create a crisis communication plan, which we will go over in a little bit. And who's going to speak on your behalf? Certainly, if it's a catastrophic crisis, they want, leadership, which you should have. But oftentimes it's a content expert. Maybe it's somebody who is a trustee who can maybe give a perspective that, that's important to have. And the last thing is, you want to make sure that regardless of what you decide to say, everyone knows what the talking points are, so that nobody's vulnerable in that way. And so I think it's a perfect lead-in to asking Kate Merlin from Peabody Institute Library to share a little bit about what she's been dealing with. And just as before Kate speaks with you, Celeste, Bruno, and June and I talked with a fair amount of library directors, and it was clear to us that Kate had really immersed herself in crisis management way before the training was being put together. And so we just thought she'd be a really great person to speak with you today. So take it away, Kate.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Immersing is the right word. Hi, good morning. So I, as Maria said, I was asked to speak today in the hopes that the best practices that I had developed for my staff in the midst of our Baby's First Book Challenge last January would be of help to you. And I can say that we, over the past week, have been dealing with another crisis, a book challenge-y type crisis. And I can speak to the fact that this training has been incredibly helpful, because we did this same training 2 weeks ago. So pay attention, it's really helpful. Basically, what I've learned over the last year and I'm using right now is that having strategies to deal with patrons and complaints in the media in the moment means you have to do a lot of preparation ahead of time. You have to do a lot of building blocks and foundational work ahead of time to get your ducks in a row. So when the thing happens, you're not floundering basically and struggling. So the things that I've worked on are building community support, and especially controlling the narrative within my staff and my trustees and my foundation and our mayor and the whole city. So again, this prep happens ahead of time. So then when that patron does walk into your library or sends you the Facebook message or calls your staff, and it's usually, in our case, it's usually our part-time staff that work 12 hours a week, and they're not the ones that are thinking about this all the time. So this really makes sure that the moment that we're approached with a complaint or issue, we're ready to deal with it and people are not flustered and scared. So I had not done any of this prep work before my first book challenge last January. I had been expecting a book challenge to happen, as we all do, I think, daily, but nothing had happened yet. And then I got an email in January of 2022 that actually went to 6 different Noble libraries. It dealt with one patron from not Peabody challenging the same book in 6 of our libraries. The email came to the staff member who was managing our West branch, who had the book on the shelf. And basically the email was demanding that we remove the book. And she emailed me and said, hey, how do you want me to respond? And I realized then that as many times as I had thought about this and discussed it with my assistant director and my trustees and the staff a little bit, having to deal with this in the moment was a really different thing. And I realized that people were not ready, and that was my fault, that people were not ready to handle this in the moment. Because, you know, no matter how well written your policies are and how much your staff reads them and your trustees know them and people go over them, it's the staff that actually deal with the email or the phone call or the angry patron in person that really need to know what to do. So it's our jobs as administration to make sure that all of our staff, no matter where they are as prepared as I am to deal with these potential situations. And they feel professionally empowered to speak with the patron and handle the situation without getting flustered or getting scared or feeling threatened. So I also realized in that moment that our trustees and mayor would obviously have to deal with this too. I called our mayor and said, Mayor, you know, we have a book challenge on our hands, and his response was, a book challenge, great, how many minutes do I have to read? Because he thought I was talking about a reading challenge. And I realized that, like, we live this world every day and we think about this day in and day out, but people that are not in the library world don't know what's going on. People know a bit more now, but a lot of people still don't know what we're dealing with and don't know what the situation is. So there's a lot of education ahead of time that you have to explain even to your trustees or your foundation, your advocates, or your mayor or your city council, like what book challenges are, what they mean, and what your policies are. So when they get these phone calls, they're also ready to deal with it. So I basically in the moment came up with really, for my staff and my mayor and my trustees, really detailed down to the word, kind of choose your own adventure style scripts, which meant that every staff member, no matter how if they were a part-timer or a full-timer, knew what to say in every situation if a patron called or emailed or showed up, and they wouldn't be caught, you know, deer in the headlights, not knowing what to do with an angry patron in front of them. They're really simple, and I think the link is going to be posted at some point, or it's on the website. There's a PDF. They're really simple and straightforward and not very creative, but if you have these in front of something like this that works for your organization, obviously in front of your staff, they won't panic, hopefully. Or if they do panic, at least there's somewhere for them to look and say the right thing. The whole point of this is to, from my point of view, a patron comes in with a really strong emotion, and it's our job to be unemotional and to focus on policy and take the emotion out of it. So if you have these scripts for your staff, they're more likely to deal with it in an emotional, you know, kind of flat manner and just give the appropriate information without getting caught up in the emotional moment, which is really tough not to do. Again, the scripts are really basic. You know, you're welcome to speak with our director about that. Here's the official process. And then how to pass on appropriate information to myself. You know, whether it's just an email that says a patron would like to speak with you, but the contact information goes in an envelope in my mailbox, stuff like that. So just protecting patron privacy and making sure that stuff is not handled incorrectly. My scripts for my staff also remind them what policies and paperwork are present at what service desks over our 3 branches. And then they emphasize, again, policy over emotional. And it reminds the staff that all of our decisions are built on unemotional, objective policy. And again, these scripts just hopefully take some of the emotion out of it. One of the little things that I stress, which I've seen work a couple of years ago, I had somebody bring a book to the attention of one of my aides about a scene that she didn't like in the book, and my aide or part-timer said, you know, I'm really sorry. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. And the patron's response was, see, you didn't know that was in the book. See, I am telling you, and you didn't purchase this book correctly. And I realized that, like, that's, you know, our human selves want to kind of automatically empathize with people and be kind to people, but sometimes saying something as simple like that is implying to the patron that we don't know what's in our book, we're not purchasing according to policy, and we did mess up. And in the moment, that's like the last thing you want to do, to feed into whatever they're believing. So you know, I tell my staff little things like, don't say, I apologize, you're upset, or like, I understand why you're concerned. They can say things like, I understand that you have a concern about this book, because that's still acknowledging that you hear them, but it's not taking any blame or acknowledging that we've done anything wrong on our part. But it's that little, like, those little language tweaks that can make a big difference in how people deal with this. So my staff basically is mostly trained to say, you know, we do have a formal request for reconsideration process, and you're welcome to speak with the library director for more information. Again, that cuts the emotion out of it. And it shifts the focus from that staff member in front of the patron to the policy and myself, because I'm the one that needs to be dealing with that, not the part-time staff member. As I said, I also had to do really serious education in the moment. Don't do it in the moment. It's exhausting, of our trustees, our foundation, and mayors. The trustees in our process make the final decision after a couple appeals of if a book is going to be pulled or moved or whatever. And I realized that, trustees were vaguely aware of our policy and they had read it, but I needed to make sure that they knew if they were contacted, just send it right back to me. If somebody tried to talk to them, send them right back to me. They needed to be reminded of that protocol and what to do if they received an email or if they received a phone call on their personal cell phone. And the mayor, same with him. I explained that, this is my situation. This is a library thing. Just here's the policy. You can send it to them and refer them directly back to me. He also did receive, he's receiving phone calls now, but this original one, he did not receive any phone calls. He didn't receive any communication from anybody, which was lucky. He was not brought into it, but I obviously needed to prepare him. I also sent him the ALA Bill of Rights and all of our policies, which was interesting because he really had no idea that any of this existed, but education, it's helpful. So basically, in the end, that book, all 6 of the Noble Libraries decided to retain the book and maybe make some adjustments if it was displayed or not, because the book itself was kind of not well done. But it was a very unemotional, uninteresting in the end process, because my staff then felt prepared for the next one and we all followed our policies. Every library followed our policies and we were all ready to go. So again, I suggest taking a look at the scripts and obviously adjust them for your own staff, but it's really helpful just to have it written down at a public service desk or available in somebody's email to look up. Just having that language is really, really, really helpful and calming in the moment. So yeah, what else? So since then, basically, I have scripts developed for any media inquiries and basic patron complaints from about the building or about a program or stuff like that, and also for First Amendment audits and other First Amendment challenges. And then also I have information the trustees have about, media inquiries and stuff like that. I think that everybody involved now feels more prepared for this inevitable complaints or other issues, which are happening right now. And I do feel better that knowing my staff and advocates know how to deal with these situations, they're not going to be caught off guard. Basically, so this is all interesting to talk about now because about a week ago, I started getting Facebook messages and emails and phone calls with some PBD residents concerned about a kid's picture book. And the language and the rhetoric escalated real quickly to the very dramatic, offensive boilerplate statements that are the worst you could possibly expect from a book challenge of this nature. And I had just gone over the scripts for this training, so I luckily had them right in front of me, but I realized I still had a couple more tweaks to make. But when I sent them to my staff, they all were like, oh, yeah, we already know these. I saw one of my staff members in the hallway and I was like, oh, can I talk to you about something? I said, so, told her in my office, if somebody calls and complains about a book, she's like, send them straight to you. Don't say anything. I understand. I have the scripts. Everybody remembered it, which was really nice. I go over this every couple months, but you never know what sticks. So we actually had a patron, one of the phone messages I received and saved, which was fun to listen to, called and got one of our part-time 12-hour people on the phone on a Wednesday night. And I was at home and I received an email from him saying the script of Kate, a library patron called and would like to discuss our materials with you. I've sent her to your voicemail, because that was the script I had given him. So I immediately, of course, because my husband was like, just wait till tomorrow morning, but who can wait to listen to these kind of things? I dialed in and listened to the voicemail and it was intense and a bit much. But I talked to him a couple days ago and said what happened? Thank you for following the script. I was really proud, yay, go team. What happened? And he said, oh, I feel horrible because she called and just started going. And I just let her talk for too long. And I said, why? And he said, well, I had the email. I just couldn't find it. I was flustered, but I knew the email existed. So I just kind of tuned her out while I looked for the email and finally said, I can send you to our director's voicemail, and send her to the voicemail. And this woman didn't leave a number she just wanted to yell at me. But it worked. And I was really pleased that this guy was like, it's fine. I had the scripts. I just kept letting her talking because I couldn't find the email. So printing out the email is helpful too. But because of this last week, then I've developed for myself boilerplate, copy and paste language to respond to the Facebook messages and the voicemails and everything about what I say to people and how I mention the policy and everything. So I have scripts for myself now, which is helpful. Our mayor also started getting phone calls last week, and he remembered the policy and said, this is the library policy, contact the library director. These people are currently refusing to file a challenge, which is interesting because they say the deck is rigged against them and they're not. it's not going to work because our policies say that we don't pull a book that was bought according to our policies, and this book was bought according to your policies, so why bother? So that's different. But because there's no official challenge, I can't really tell anybody. I like my trustee president knows, but I can't really prepare anybody else. So we're just kind of waiting to see what happens. They also, called for 3 days and were harassing us, and then they disappeared. So who knows? But in my paranoid head, because I'm always operating from a place of a little bit of paranoid planning ahead, I also talked to our police chief and warned him about the situation. I also, I have a fear that they're going to try to run for some of our vacant trustee positions that are open in the fall. And so over the past week, I've had foundation members recruit and line up a couple candidates to run for those positions to make sure we're kind of all protected there. But again, it's just all this kind of like looking behind the scenes and what can I do to shore up our support, and what can I do to make sure that everybody's prepared to talk to people. I also talked to the chief of police so he knows what's happening. And something I suggest, which has been interesting, the first time I received a phone call, it was just I got a voicemail, and I had the name and the number of the person recorded on voicemail. And so I decided at that point, I'm essentially for a while screening all outside calls and just letting them go to voicemail, because as soon as a voicemail picks up, that person is allowing themselves to be recorded. So I have these voicemails to play for the police if anything crazy were to happen and horrible were to happen. And I also have a record of what I'm dealing with. So I'm printing out all of the emails and Facebook messages we received. I have files saved, but I'm also printing out hard copies, and I've double recorded the voicemails to just keep a record of this. And this might turn into nothing, but you can't be too prepared for something like this. These people maybe just needed to yell and move on with their lives. I don't think that's the case. But again, we're prepared. And a couple other, preparation things I suggest, as I then stop talking at you for a while, that, people in this position who are doing these challenges are learning more and more, and think about the limited legal options they do have in terms of challenging books, because I think they're starting to realize that book challenge is not really going to do what they think it's going to do. We're not going to pull a book, right? Unless under very limited circumstances. So just a reminder that like any email or personal text message or personal email you sent could possibly be FOIA'd in the future. So my staff knows when this happens, like we go radio silence. We don't G-chat about it on our personal accounts. We don't text about it. There is no discussion in emails unless I'm sending out an official informational email. Just remind your staff that like personal stuff under certain circumstances can be FOIA'd as well. So just be very careful. So these people aren't able to take advantage of you in that way and try to do like some gotcha FOIA-ing. And the trustees know the same thing, know what to do. And then also in terms of like public meetings, please make sure that your trustees are up to date on what the new Supreme Judicial Court ruling a couple weeks ago on like civility in public comment areas and public meetings, what that means for your boards. You can just Google that and look at information, and make sure they have a protocol in place to, if you don't have something normally where people can show up and do public comment and people do show up and want to speak, make sure you have protocol in place of like time limits and who can speak and everything. So you're prepared, again, preparing your trustees so they're not dealing with people yelling at them in the moment. Also policies. I suggest if you can get every single one of your policies down to like the dumb ones about like no floppy disks. We used to have that one until recently. Looked over by your town council, by your city solicitor, whatever they are. In that way, they can tell you if there's little things that need to be tweaked to make it legal, because sometimes we make policies that feel that they're legal, but they're not quite there in terms of like First Amendments, in terms of meeting rooms and stuff like that. But also that ensures that if somebody were to speak out against the library or try to sue for something, the city has your back and you're not left out to dry because you did something that's not, defensible, essentially. And little things can't be held against the library. And I have to say, through all of this, a huge plug for the amazing statewide consultants and staff that we have to work on these things with you. I last year and then this year as well have been speaking with MBLC specialists and MLS consultants and the MLA Electoral Freedom Committee, and all of those organizations are incredibly helpful for sharing best practices, suggesting best practices and the resources to look up, and also just to kind of listen and commiserate and make sure you're not alone and we're all dealing with this. We don't talk about it a lot because it's an awkward thing and it's uncomfortable in terms of like public records things. It's not great to talk about, but it's not just you. So sorry, it's a lot of us, unfortunately. But I mean, basically in the end, getting all of these ducks in a row is really worth it. I wish that I had done it earlier, but for this challenge we're going through right now with this training as well, I feel prepared. If this does turn into a challenge and keep going, I'm ready for it, and ready to talk to the media and ready to talk to city, people that live in our community and people that might have concerns either way. It's really worth doing the work and getting things codified and written down and ready to go. I think that anything you can do to prepare your staff and trustees and cities and anybody involved and any advocate is really worth the time. And people might roll their eyes and say you're being paranoid in the moment, but I promise you, they'll say that. And then the phone calls will start and then they'll be happy they did it, because that's what we're dealing with now. You can reach out to me if you have any questions, or look on the PBD website and reach out to me. And again, feel free to take these scripts. If they're not applicable to your staff, obviously tweak them, change them, but it's just that little work goes a long way. And good luck out there. Stay safe.
Thanks so much, Kate. Yeah, I have to say that there's so many different elements of what you have done in Peabody that they're just huge. You know, you first of all, you got support from your local government. You got your mayor understanding what you're faced with. You created messaging that communicated the library's position. You trained your staff. I don't know if you just mentioned this, but you had mentioned earlier that you had role played with them, just to make sure they were comfortable. Your policies are in place. You've done really all the right things. Your instincts are great. And that's really what, that kind of preparation is what makes the difference in a crisis. It's truly a difference between you're not prepared and therefore, the library loses ground or looks bad, in the community's eyes, and their narrative gets hijacked. Or, you control the narrative, you've prepped your people, you come out of this ahead because you've done all those things in preparation. So that was fantastic. So thank you for that.